Philip II lay helpless, his flesh ravaged by disease, his bed teeming with parasites. The stench of death clung to the halls of El Escorial, where prayers could no longer drown out his screams. El Escorial, September 1598. A suffocating stillness choked the palace halls, pierced only by the hushed murmurs of desperate physicians and the occasional, haunting moan that slithered from behind the chamber doors. Inside, atop a rotting bed, lay a man twisted in unspeakable agony. His body, once an instrument of power, now resembled a grotesque shell. Gnarled hands gnawed by gout curled like dead claws. His legs, grotesquely swollen with fluid, had long surrendered to uselessness. The stench of his decaying flesh clung to the air, so foul that even his most loyal attendants shielded their faces in revulsion. But this was no pauper dying in obscurity. This was Philip II, sovereign of Spain, Portugal, Naples, Sicily, Duke of Milan, master of the new world, monarch of an empire where the sun dared not set. He had once defied England's queen, built the mighty Escorial, and hunted Protestants like prey. Yet now the mighty king lay rotting, abandoned by the very body that once upheld his dominion. What curse had befallen such a ruler? What unseen judgment had brought the earth's most powerful man to this vile, crawling end? The answers, thick with rot and shadow, festered in that chamber waiting to be uncovered. What darkness could consume the most powerful king the world had ever known? To grasp the full horror of Philip II's final days, we must step backward into shadows long cast by power, faith, and obsession. Born on May 21, 1527, in the ancient city of Valladolid, Philip emerged as the heir to a vast, uneasy empire. His father, Emperor Charles V, was a war-hardened sovereign. His mother, the Portuguese Princess Isabella, a symbol of royal bloodline purity. But unlike his father, Philip did not chase glory on battlefields. Instead, he vanished into candlelit studies, where parchment and pen ruled. He became a prisoner of paper, so obsessed with bureaucracy that he earned the name El Rey de los Papeles, the king of papers. Alone in silence, he documented every tendril of his dominion with relentless precision. In 1556, as Charles V receded into cloistered exile, Philip ascended the Spanish throne. When King Sebastian of Portugal vanished in 1578, Philip seized opportunity like a vulture over a battlefield. In 1580, after crushing his rival Dom Antonio, he declared himself king of Portugal, binding two mighty crowns beneath one grim hand. Yet behind the golden mask was a man twisted by zeal. He saw himself as God's enforcer. Under his iron gaze, the Inquisition bloomed, snuffing out heresy with fire and steel. Still, he adored beauty, collecting art, building wonders. His masterpiece, the monastery of San Lorenzo de El Escorial, rose like a tomb of kings and ghosts, blending monastery, palace, and mausoleum, his warped mirror of divine order. And so, Philip ruled silken robes, hiding rusted chains, a king wrapped in shadows, whispering secrets in dead languages, but no ink, no stone. No holy writ could prepare him for the fate that crawled ever closer, unseen, inevitable. In the cold corridors of royal legacy, Philip II's private life unfolded like a cursed tale written in blood and shadows. He married 4 times, each union marking another step down a spiral of misfortune. Maria Manuela of Portugal, his first bride, gave him a son, Prince Carlos, and died in agony during childbirth. Carlos, born in pain, would later be locked away by Philip himself, cast into darkness for insubordination, and dead under mysterious whispers no priest could cleanse. Next came Mary Tudor, Bloody Mary of England, who bore him no heir before death claimed her, leaving behind only political ash. Then Elizabeth of Valois brought brief light and 2 daughters, only to vanish in the cruel ritual of childbirth. The 4th, Anna of Austria, his own niece, finally gave him the heir he craved, the future Philip III. Yet death hovered close. Only 5 children outlived infancy, as if the bloodline were haunted. Despite his throne's weight, Philip's body crumbled early. From youth, he battled gout, his joints twisted by uric fire, cursed by the king's disease. Rich meats and red wine fueled the torment that would soon become his prison. By 1590, age 63, he was withering. Malaria joined the slow march of decay, tertian fevers tearing through him every 3 days. And then edema, that creeping tide, swallowed his legs until they no longer resembled flesh but grotesque relics. The king, once sovereign over the worlds, now stared at his own corrupted form. His reign had been built on power and divine purpose, but now unseen diseases crawled through him like judgment made flesh. His bed was no longer a place of rest but a dark altar, where the sins of empire festered in swollen silence. The horror had only begun. The diseases came not all at once, but in dreadful procession like executioners taking turns. One by one, they crept through the walls of flesh and throne, until the king of half the world lay shackled by his own failing body. Once called the prudent king, Philip II was now a prisoner in a decaying shell. The last 2 years of his life were not years at all, but an unrelenting torment, an earthly purgatory carved into days and nights of unspeakable suffering. By 1596, he could barely hold a quill. His fingers, once instruments of power and policy, had become claws bent and blistered by gout. It was a cruel irony. The man who ruled empires through documents and decrees could no longer even sign his name. And, with each passing day, the man who had once commanded oceans and armies lost dominion over his own flesh. In July 1598, the agony escalated. Edema spread like a tide across his body, swelling him grotesquely. Gout, no longer content with his limbs, gnawed its way into his knees, elbows, even his spine. His cries echoed down the stone corridors, but no treatment brought relief. Royal physicians bled him, purged him, tried every medieval remedy in vain. Each procedure only hastened the decay. Fevers came in waves, relentless, infernal. Philip drifted in and out of delirium, sometimes whispering prayers, sometimes moaning in agony. His body, motionless and fever-stricken, began to rot in place. Bedsores opened across his back, buttocks, and legs, wounds that festered and spread. Insects were drawn like carrion to a battlefield. The king's mattress was punctured to drain his fluids, because turning him caused screams that shattered the silence. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. One subscribe from you will be a huge encouragement for us to grow the channel and create even better content in the future. Thank you so much to all the brothers. Then came the lice. A plague of parasites infested his royal skin, feeding freely on the flesh of an emperor. In one of his final lucid moments, Philip muttered, "See how this body that ruled half the world now cannot even command its own parasites." The servants and courtiers, once proud to stand in his presence, now watched in silent horror as insects danced across their king. What unfolded in that chamber was not merely the breakdown of a man, but the collapse of an age. Philip II, the holy warrior, the instrument of God's wrath, was being eaten alive, powerless even to swat away the tiniest foe. The suffering was not just physical, it was spiritual. He believed his agony to be divine punishment, a preview of purgatory. One priest wrote that the king endured his pain with saintly patience, as if he had accepted his body's ruin as the cost of his soul's redemption. And then, after 52 days of unbroken agony, dawn came. September 13, 1598. Philip lay still, a crucifix clenched in his gnarled fingers, his lips moving in a whisper, perhaps a prayer, perhaps an apology. No one could hear clearly. But when death finally took him, his face relaxed, the lines of pain softened, as though something merciful had finally silenced the torment. Yet what remained was no longer a man. His body, disfigured and grotesque, had become a relic of horror. The embalmers struggled to make the corpse resemble the sovereign he once was, and when they were done, they sealed him in a tomb beneath El Escorial, the grand monastery palace he had built as a monument to power and faith. There, deep beneath stone and silence, rests a king. But his final days whisper still a dreadful reminder that even the most powerful men can rot, scream, and be devoured in the end. The death of Philip II did not simply end a reign, it sealed a grim and contradictory chapter in Europe's haunted past. Here was a king who devoted his existence to the sword of faith, to the endless expansion of Catholic power, who hurled the Spanish Armada at England's shores, crushed the rebels of the Netherlands, and wove Portugal into Spain's blood-stained crown. And yet, in the final hour, This titan of Christendom withered into a grotesque ruin that left even his most devout followers in stunned horror. His end mocked his life. Philip had once ruled as if he were a divine mechanism calculating, all-seeing, in control of every breath within his empire. Religion, politics, culture, oceans, and distant colonies bent under his gaze. He built a machine of governance so vast and meticulous that nothing escaped its grasp, nothing except his own decaying body, that no signature or seal could command. Scholars still argue how this prolonged decay may have warped Spain's fate. Some whisper that as his flesh failed, so too did his clarity. He became more reliant on advisors, men who lacked his strategic cruelty, allowing defeat and decline to rot the empire from within. Others say the pain humbled him, made him more inclined to sue for peace, to lay down the sword he once raised with divine conviction. What none debate is the horror his death inspired. In a time when the king's flesh was seen as the flesh of the realm, Philip's fate was apocalyptic. The monarch anointed by God, now a broken husk eaten by parasites, cast a shadow of doubt across the concept of divine rule. If even God's chosen vessel could suffer such ruin, what hope had any soul? His son Philip III of Spain, Philip II of Portugal, took the throne of a wounded empire. But unlike his father, he was no architect of fate. He delegated power, seeking comfort where his father embraced pain. Perhaps he had seen too much, watched too closely. As greatness decayed in silence, Philip II's death was not a whisper but a tolling bell. It reminded the world that no throne is eternal, no body untouchable. The man who once ruled beneath an unsetting sun descended into a long, excruciating twilight. His end was not a quiet retreat, but a brutal unraveling, a memento mori carved into the soul of an empire. His story, twisted and slow, is more than a morbid curiosity. It is a testament. Beneath crowns and scepters are bones and blood, fear and failure. Even kings, especially kings, must face the final reckoning. Power cannot halt decay, and no decree, no dogma, no divine right can prevent a sovereign from becoming dust.